What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the Alto again, and this time we got round three with Damien of Virtue. Thanks for coming back, man. It's great to have you here. When are you co-hosting this shit with me?
Whenever you ask. So at this point now, I might as well, get my royalties, get my little 15%, something like that in there.
You ain't getting any royalties on this channel, let me tell you, with my 5,000 plus subscribers. Sorry, man. But hey, it's great to have you here because last time I spoke to you, I only got to really listen to the singles from Omen, the latest record, and now But now that the full album is out, I got a chance to really listen to it and digest it. And when you open up with Omen and you end with False Idols, like it's just really just an epic adventure of a listen and really takes you through many different twists and turns. So with every passing listen on this album, I'm always discovering new things on it, whether it's, really certain lyrics standing out to me more or understanding a riff a little bit more. For you, now that this album's been out for a minute, pretty much a year now, are you and Tyler and everybody still discovering new stuff in it as well?
Yeah. And I would say that for us, it comes more when we've been playing more of the new songs live. So like, the last tour, we had a chance to, start playing True Colors, and that was one where it's a very visceral song for Tyler. Like he went through, a pretty nasty breakup. I also had some issues with like some friends and a few other things. So it's one of those where, it is a single, but at the same time, it's a little heavier than some of the other ones. But we're always conscious of like set construction. You want it to be fluid. You want everything to, move smoothly. But it was nice, like where I will say this personally, it wasn't necessarily one of my favorites on the album. Like I do like it. I enjoy every single song, but obviously, people can gravitate towards different things. That like playing it live every night was one of those where it changed my mind completely, where I'm like, oh, this thing slams. Like when people are singing along, they're jumping up and down, doing all this, and they know the words to it, and it's like, okay, wow, that's actually pretty sick. So like, even for us, like just going through, and I'll listen to the record every now and then. I'm not gonna say I jam it all the time because obviously we have to play it, but there'll still be moments where like we'll go back and it's like, man, that was really cool. Or you think about maybe how certain stuff was created, or there could be just little things that trigger that where I'm like, kind of like what you say, you're discovering little things. In some ways for us, it's like even just going back and seeing how these were made and kind of being like, wow, I didn't realize all of this was going on during this time. Or, it is pretty cool to go back and try to do that with your own music.
And it's funny too because like when there's certain songs that are very personal for a specific member and stuff, do you almost have to, like you mentioned, I forgot which song you said, but with a very personal song for Tyler, like do you almost have to kind of like put yourself in his shoes in order to like understand how you're going to write this in a way? Because when there's a song that's about a specific experience of one member for a band, it's great when you have, the camaraderie of your bandmates to help create that catharsis, but the reality is you didn't experience what he experienced and vice versa. So do you almost kind of have to like put yourself in his shoes and maybe kind of feel the same emotion that one member was feeling and whatnot?
Depending on the song, yes. I know that, so kind of like the way that you were describing it is that would be like Sinner for the rest of my guys, and like what that song kind of means for me, where it's like they never had to, struggle with, the things that I've had to struggle with. But at the same time, it's like they do, people, you can empathize with the situation. With some other songs, like, so True Colors, for example, I've gone through pretty nasty breakups. I've lost friends. I've lost family members. I've had arguments, or just, it's one of those where the creation of that song, it came from Tyler's perspective, but it's something that I have gone through. So I don't have to necessarily put myself in his shoes to say like, oh, okay, I know what you're feeling because there was a time when, I went through something very similar. And it's like, those are the kind of experiences and things where, that's the nice thing about music. It can be very direct and it can translate very easily, or sometimes you do have to kind of transport yourself into the mind and the heart of somebody else. But in this case, it was one of those where it's like, Oh no, I know exactly what you're feeling, and apparently the audience did too.
Yeah,
So
because I can't remember if I mentioned this the last two times I spoke to you, but whenever a band tells me, when I ask like how the making of an album is, and they say, "Oh, it was all mutually, we all felt the same way about everything," like I don't buy that for a second. If you're in a band with four other people with all different experiences, making 12 or so songs with different instruments, you're all gonna have different emotions and resonate with songs differently, right?
oh, absolutely. And I would be lying if I said like we didn't really have too many like arguments per se, but it's like there are times when it's like you're just not on the same page with something or how you want to convey a specific topic, or there could just be things where it's just like, yeah, I just don't agree with that, and you have to figure out a way around it. So yeah, no, but that again, it contributes to the overall listening experience so that when you do finally get onto the same page with everybody, it's like, okay, this feels complete. Now it feels like everyone's opinion was heard, everyone's, you know, put their stamp, put their feel onto whether it's lyrics, whether it's music, if it's a design, if it's just the vibe or the atmosphere and the energy that you're trying to capture, kind of like you said before, I'm also not going to sit here and lie to anybody and say that this was a perfectly harmonious experience. Like, this album was written during COVID, which for anybody in this world, like, unless you're a billionaire, and I just, at this point, probably don't want to talk to you,
Yeah.
like, you were going through some stuff, man. It's like, and your friends, your family, you probably had some disagreements. You probably had some fights. You probably had some, just even going out into the world and, reintegrating with strangers and, getting their perspective on things. So it's all, like I said,
What I think
you hit the nail on the head.
And what I think what it was about COVID too that made it, because I know a lot of people, and I could agree, where like it's cliche this album was written during COVID or COVID, like, but I think what made COVID, the pandemic, such a unique experience for creativity was you looked around into the world and you saw this desolation and you saw this real eeriness and all that. Then you also had the social media aspect of it with everybody killing. It almost seemed like while the whole world was isolated and we were isolated, the one time you see people interacting with each other, it's not usually in the best of light on social media. And then, there's all this introspection. A lot of isolation forces you to reflect as well. So it was a whole period, like, not to discredit tragedy that surrounded the world before, but you take like a war, for example. That is one country fighting another country. It's an external conflict. You face that war. And I really feel like only the people really experiencing that firsthand have the internal struggle with it. But this, on the other hand, everybody was equally affected by it one way or another, internally and externally. Whether you thought the pandemic was a hoax or if it was the scariest thing you've experienced,
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing is like, it's a shared experience on so many different levels. It's a footnote that, when we're old enough and we can look back and you're going to, if you have children or if you look at this and you look at their history book and you're going to see, oh, I'm very curious how, our our higher ups are going to write this one into, reading this one in the future. But again, it's one of those where, like everybody else, with the isolation, with the, I guess, almost disassociation in some ways, where it's like everyone kind of didn't really know what to do, but at the same time, everyone just let out whatever was going on, whether it was online as far as like TikTok and like the boom of that, where people would just have fun, just be creative. You don't care what other people think, because really nobody knows what's happening, except for maybe a few different people. And at least with music, having that chance to reflect, and in some ways, again, like what we were talking about with getting on the same page, it's like, especially in, not only just the music industry, but just in life, it's like you could be lock in step with your family, with your friends, with your band, whoever that may be. But over time, you kind of gradually fade. You drift. It's natural. But in this case, it was like, this was the thing that it forced everybody kind of to come back and take those differences, take everything and just kind of put it aside and go, hey, you know what? At least in musical terms or in band terms, the artists that we've seen that are succeeding at a level that they probably never succeeded before, or newer artists that maybe are struggling to find their hood footing. And I can even put ourselves in there where it's like, we're touring, we're doing this, we're grinding. And we did lose sight of some things along the way that we were able to correct with the time off. And to be completely fair, man, it's like Omen and everything about it showcases that. It showcases the ability for us to, be able to drift, be able to come back to each other, to be able to argue, to be able to fight, but then at the same time to tell these beautifully tragic stories in a way that we wouldn't have been able to do before. And I think I'm going to hope, even just me talking to you for the, 17th time, it's like something is working. Something is there. There's a connection that was made that, had it not been for this once in a lifetime global economic, medical disaster, travesty, whatever you want to call it. It's like it happened. And the only thing that we could do about it is document it, write about it, express our feelings about it, and see where it goes from there.
Do you think entering the pandemic with What Defines You to coming out of it with this, I mean, that it almost seems like you have like a bookend in a way. It almost seems like when I listen to What Defines You now, it almost seems like it ends on a cliffhanger, and that Omen is almost kind of like the sequel to it.
Yeah, and that's, it's the natural progression of things. It's if you've been a band for a while and your sound, like our sound didn't really change too much, but it just felt like What Defines You for us, it was a transitional record. Omen almost kind of feels like a transitional record in some ways, but it's like, it's just like a book, man. It's chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, and as long as we have breath in our bodies, we're going to keep going. And the next thing that comes off of this, we're going to tie that into Omen as well, because we do want people to go through the timeline of us as a band and be able to see and pinpoint, where we were at, what was going on in specific points of any of our lives. Even if there were different members there, it's like, that is a part of the thing. People come in, some people come out. Some things are not always the same, but it's how you adapt, it's how you change, it's how to almost kind of survive in, maybe a little more primitive way. But
and I know that mental health is something that is something you express very much in Of Virtue, which is a reason why I have the utmost respect for the band. And I know that you work very closely with Heart Support, and that this is a subject matter you like to address. Now, mental health has been a subject matter that's been addressed not just in all styles of metal, but all styles of music as well. Mental health has been, you have a band like Nightfall out of Greece that's like a black metal or death metal band that sings about it. You have bands like that are doom, that are really focused on the grimiest side. Why do you feel that the style that we hear in Of Virtue, the more experimental sort of post-hardcore metalcore style, not to pigeonhole you guys by any means, but why do you feel like that this sort of style is mainly the best way to sort of express this important message?
It's the best because it's the most authentic to us. It's one of the lessons that we've really, I would say, learned, especially going into Omen, is just go back to the roots, man. Go back to the things that made the hair stand up on your arms. Like when we were getting into music, it's for Tyler, if it's Breaking Benjamin and We Came as Romans, if it's myself or Mike and us growing up listening to Linkin Park and Slipknot and Deftones, and like those bands maybe didn't always talk about the things that we wanted to talk about, but sonically and lyrically it touched us in a way where it's like we want to take part of that. We want to take part of this. And as you go through your musical timeline and musical progression, it's like, kind of like what you were saying. It's like you can be a black metal band or like a death metal band or whatever it is. You can sing about whatever you want. It doesn't mean just because you're a death metal band doesn't mean you always have to talk about, skulls and blood and this, that, and the third. It's like if you want to be more traditional about it, sure, absolutely. But if, in my mind and in my, I guess, opinion, if you want to put your stamp on something, if you want to make something as true and authentic to yourself first before it reaches the rest of the world, that's the way to go about doing it. And in our case, as far as being advocates for mental health, for wanting to talk about your problems, for wanting to be more involved with the community online and just in the world. It's like, first we get our house in order so that when we can approach people, when we can talk to people, we're going to come from the most authentic place, the most sincere place. And it's going to boil down to not even just the lyrics, it'll be the backstory. If anybody, when we talk about our own past, present, future, how we're feeling, down to the studs of the actual music itself, of just why do you play this? Why do you play this specific style? And it's like, this evokes the emotion that we want to then tell what is going on with us. So
yeah, what I think is great about metal. So one of my personal favorite albums that came out last year was from the band Svalbard. I don't know if you heard of them, but their album Weight of the Mask has a huge emphasis on mental health. How we hide behind a facade to mask our depression in a way, and so you have a band like Svalbard, which is almost kind of like black metal mixed with metalcore. You have Disturbed, who sings about mental health continuously. You have a lot of hard rock and other bands and whatnot. Would you say that with this mental health message that you have, though, is it mainly based on your own personal experiences? Because we all have our own personal trials and tribulations. Or are you more or less kind of maybe seeking this subject matter outward? Is there maybe research that's involved? Do you work maybe hand in hand with Heart Support as a means of inspiration to hear other people's stories that should be expressed and told?
I would say it's both. It's, having worked with, Hope for the Day, having worked with Heart Support, Taylor, she's amazing. And the things that her and Jake and everybody else that are able to do over there are amazing. And that kind of stuff, people with those types of platforms that are a little more, I will say, educated on specific breakdowns in mental health, whether it be identifying triggers, if it's, certain neuroses or thought processes or patterns. It's like, we're thankful and we learn from them along with other techs and people out in the world about that part, so we can properly articulate, what we're saying. As far as where it comes from for us, not only it's personal experiences, it's stuff that we're still kind of going through, even to this day. It's almost kind of, it's like that. It's like Twitter. It's like anything else where it's like, we can kind of put out these streams of thought, and if other people are feeling the same way, we can interact about it, we can talk about it, we can let people know. It's like, hey, we're musicians, we're people, we're not rock stars. You can talk to us, you can message us, and this is what is coming from here. The other thing too is just simple observation. It's going out in the world, and there's too many times where everybody thinks, it's the whole check on your strong friends thing, or just don't judge a book by its cover. You see people grinding every day, man. People working 9 to 5s, trying to survive, feed their families. And sometimes people don't really think about the toll that that's going to take, or just, again, observing maybe, I don't want to say people behaving in certain ways, but it's even that, it weighs on you. That if you're an empath, or if you have that type of thing where you're going to absorb that energy, it's seeing that and seeing maybe something that triggers you in a way where it makes you feel I would hope that we could get more of that out of here. We don't want that in the world. You don't want to spread any type of negativity. But then you also have to think about well, what is the source of that? Because what you're seeing sometimes might not add up to what's actually going on. So it's a
Yeah.
What do you call that?
And
it's just an amalgamation of topics and things, man.
Mental health is really one of the hardest, because I'll put it to you this way. You break a leg, whether I break a leg or you break a leg, we live different lives and whatnot. But if you and I both broke our legs, I'm pretty sure our doctor would tell us put a cast on it and, and follow the same precautions. If, we have a dietary issue, you and I both are having too much sugar, the doctor would tell us the same thing. Don't have too much sugar. With mental health, it's really complicated, because everybody's mental health could be rooted in something you are born with. It could also be rooted in something you did experience, whether it will be associated with trauma. It could be building up and you never know when someone snaps. And on top of that, there's also the important message where you're not alone, but at the same time there's also the message that we need to express where it's also not an excuse either. It's not anything to be ashamed of, but it's also not something to be excused for either. I see people using mental illness as an excuse to be some of the worst pieces of shit on the face of the earth. And that too is also bad, because it creates a stigma around people who really are struggling.
Oh, absolutely. And again, that and the last part I want to address that part first. If you do identify something, or if people do identify something and it's like they still act a certain way, that's always going to be the most troublesome thing, because again, you're making it, and whether some people actually are conscious about it or not, that's another topic within that, where it's like, if I point out these behaviors, or if a doctor or somebody else does this for you, and it's like you still are inclined to do certain things or have these tendencies, it's like, that's again a whole different issue of like, well, why do you keep wanting to do this, and how do we address it? And then from the other parts, it's, you have to tell people, hey, use the 9 out of 10 thing. It's like, if that person is the one person, just remember that there's still 9 other people that it's like, that might not be the case for them, and let's not apply this one size fits all glove
Yeah.
to any and all situation, because at the end of it, as long as human beings exist, as long as we have any type of, we have different social backgrounds, you have different people make different money, they celebrate different religions, they just like different things, man, then there's always, that conversation's always going to be revolving, that conversation's always going to change. And like anything else, we have to change, and we have to change our thought processes with it. Some things that might be applicable now, they might not be applicable in 15 years.
Absolutely.
And that's okay.
Yeah, it's like,
and you don't want to demonize people for that either. You want to say, hey, this is where we were at with mainstream thought and mainstream conscience. And once we can now analyze that and go through it and say, hey, look, okay, maybe this isn't quite it, this isn't it, but you're always striving for that progress. You're always striving to find the good and find the better, so that you can help out as many people as you can. That should always and still remain the focus. You know what I mean?
and this leads me perfectly into the final question I wanted to ask, because one theory that I have, and this question may be very, very long, so do forgive me, but like one theory that I've had to why people have been struggling so much lately is because I feel like a lot of people have to be quote unquote on. You're in a band and you're in the public eye right now with, a Sinner having 9 million plus views. So people know, there are people who know who you are. And I'm sure that when you're out at a show and you're on stage or you're talking with your label or people in the industry, there's a level of professionalism that you have to maintain, and that there's like a level, you have to make sure that you're quote unquote on. You don't want to say the wrong thing or, kind of let yourself too loose. And I feel like, this is why a lot of celebrities, I feel like, whether it be Lindsay Lohan or Amanda Bynes or Britney Spears or anybody who literally struggle, because they always have to feel like anything they say could be a headline, anything that they do could be photographed the next day, anything that they do could be a story that follows them the rest of their life. And now I feel like in a day where there are cameras everywhere and social media is so prevalent, I feel like that standard has almost been kind of like applied to everybody in a way. So just being on stage and now having a crowd that relates to your music and identifies with you and sees you in a certain way, do you feel like that this almost gave you a new perspective on how you analyze mental health for your music? I think that was the shortest way I could ask this question.
It was a long question, but honestly, yes and no. So I'll start with the first point, because you did address like the more of like the celebrity culture, and like I would say that while some people, they like to joke, they be like, oh, you're a rock star, you do that. It's like, no, we aren't at a level. And I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that I wouldn't want to be famous. I'm not going to sit here and say that, I don't want my band to be more popular so that we can try to, do bigger and better things, right? The one thing that I say that it doesn't change is the fact that the being on part with us, and I think this is what separates a virtue from a lot of, and it's not even in a bad way, because some people, it's just different personalities, different things. But for us, me talking to my label head, or maybe talking to my management, me talking to you, or me talking to somebody in a crowd at a show, is all going to have the same tone. Mm-hmm. It's all going to be one size fits all, and it's not really a mechanism of like, I'm trying to hold back or I'm trying to do this. It's just, it goes back to the authenticity part. this, like what you're hearing, what you're seeing is what you're going to get from us no matter what. And with social media, the thing that is nice about it, and it can make things a little hypersensitive. Like, yes, I'm probably not going to put some areas of my life online because, hey, I like that privacy. I'm owed that privacy as a human being. That's not even as a band person,
No.
person of important, whatever the case may be. It's, you are just owed that, you know, you don't have to document everything. You don't have to put everything out there to be consumed. Now, if you are a person where you do decide you want to do that, then again, it is going to come with a level of responsibility. It does come with a level of, hey, just understand that if you're going to keep peeling back some of these layers, they will have some, you do have to adjust in some ways. But I think that with the, and I'm going to flip this onto the audience. I'm going to flip this, I'm going to put myself back in the audience perspective. It's try not to put your own experiences or own things onto other people, because in some ways that is the pressure. It's like, if I'm looking to somebody for something that I can't do for myself all the time, then yes, it does give them an added responsibility. But in theory, it's not their responsibility to live my life. You know what I mean?
I love that. It's not their responsibility to live my life. I love that you said that. That really, write that down and put that in a song. Like, do not lose that.
No. And again, when some people, like, because I've said it before, and some people have taken it the wrong way to say, like, oh, well, you don't want to be a role model, or you don't want to be somebody that people. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I choose to accept that responsibility.
Yeah.
It is a choice. It is something that, in some ways, you know, if someone does look to you for something, you can only give them so much. That is why, in some ways, like, especially with, we'll talk about like the mental health advocacy or anything else, it's, you will eventually run into these little loops. You run into people that maybe didn't want the responsibility. They are also, you know, broken in some way, but then they felt the pressure of somebody looking at them going, well, I'm broken too. So what are we going to do about this? What are you going to do about this?
Yeah.
Because you're elevated. You're on an elevated platform and I'm not.
Yeah.
So, and right there, it's like, you've just taken away that person's choice. You've just taken away that person's agency. And right there, because if you have something stolen, if someone stole $20 from you, you're going to feel some kind of way.
Of course.
If someone came in and took all of those beautiful posters and that candle and the shirt off your back, it's like, it's going to stay with you. It's going to last with you. So now put that into a mental space. If someone comes in and takes away your agency, takes away your privacy, takes away your right to govern yourself, there's going to be a problem that's going to manifest. And now the stuff that you're going to say to try to lead people is not going to come from a place of authenticity. It's not going to come from a place of, well, I chose to do this, or I'm learning with everyone else. It's, I'm just doing it because X, Y, Z.
Yeah, you don't.
It's the blind leading the blind fallacy.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
First off, if somebody stole this painting, I made this painting, so if somebody stole it for me, I'd be very flattered by that. But I get the point of what you were saying. But no, you couldn't be right. You could not be more right. I mean, I've noticed, I'm not going to mention which band it is, but you could get an idea of who it is. I remember this band, they started in like 2007. They were on Mayhem Fest, like on the opening stage. 2 years later, they're headlining arenas. And then they're touring with fucking Metallica, and they're one of the most known bands, whether you love this band or hate them. In that period of time, members have deteriorated left and right. 1 minute they are just 1 minute they're playing on like the side stage that's like next to the porta potties. The next minute they have hundreds of fans saying your music saved my life. Your music got me through rehab. Your music helped me deal with trauma and abuse and all this. That shit adds pressure onto you, because you realize then the songs that you're singing about, they resonated with a lot of people, but then you realize those songs resonate with you more because it almost seems like you're deteriorating the same way that the deteriorating fan identified with it. That circle loop thing could not be more right.
Oh, absolutely, man. And it's a type of conundrum that will always exist in art and music. And I do respect people and musicians that have spoken up and said, "Hey, man, I'm not really trying to be a role model. I'm just here to play big shows, rock out, party, and have some fun. And if you choose to follow me, that's cool. If you don't, that's cool too." Like I do respect that. I know some people don't agree with that, but at the same time, it's like two things can be true. It's like there are bands where their music has it has definitely saved my life. But then when I see like and have met them or seen what they're actually about, and I go, yeah, I'm just gonna stick to the music on this one.
Fair enough. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time, and thank you for continuing to give us new music, and for always a great chat. And most of all, just thank you for saying what needed to be said on this interview. We never really got to go this in depth with it before. Just with the usual plug, what else we could be expecting from Of Virtue in the future? I know you got the Dead by April tour rescheduled. What else we could be expecting?
Yep, that tour has been rescheduled. We're working on getting our headlining dates rescheduled now. Next thing, we'll be going on tour with our friends in Imminence and Catch Your Breath, and we leave for tour in about 3 weeks. So couldn't be more excited. Again, we're going all over. So if we are coming near you, grab some tickets because shows are selling out now, which I always love waking up and hearing.
Yeah.
So
I just interviewed Imminence last week.
Great guys.
Yeah.
Great guys. They have a new record coming. All the songs so far have been amazing. So we can't wait to spend a month with them on the road and, just tear shit up, man.
Yeah, and hopefully you guys come to New York City very soon. And I know you're coming to Gramercy Theater for the Dead by April gig, which is 4 blocks from my house. So you'll see me there.
Hey, perfect.
Yeah. But great to see you, man. Everybody, we are here with Of Virtue. Once again, be sure to check out Omen if you haven't already. It is an absolute beast of an album. We'll see you next time on Heavy New York.